Long ago, Jordan Mechner put the finishing touches to one of the greatest platformers of all time. A game that has proven immensely inspirational to many past and present franchises, not least of which the Assassin's Creed series. When playing the Chronicles games, particularly this latest installment in India, flashes of Prince of Persia are clear for all to see, though it also does a good job of standing on its own 2 feet. The problem, unfortunately, is that it also seems to struggle underneath the weight of historical significance and expectation. Well, we say that because Assassin's Creed Chronicles is a beautiful looking game. The environments are varied, the colour palette is rich, the animations are lively, but the level designers seem to have this odd sense of proportion. Some of the pillars seem unusually thin and tall compared to the character models, and other buildings appear higher and sometimes lower than they should be. The handling also starts to grate. For a simple platformer, there's a surprising amount for the player to remember, and this occasionally presents some difficulties with the button mapping. For instance, it's easy to slip on a button press when moving between areas, resulting in getting caught and sliced to pieces. And that brings me to my biggest problem with the game: combat. I didn't find myself struggling massively with China a few months back, but for some reason fighting feels completely untuned in India. Button response time in particular is slow, which can present some major difficulties. Countering also seems completely off. I feel like I'm tapping at the appropriate time yet still getting hit. I also don't feel like I can get a decent sword strike in without having to struggle with the buttons, and that's not helped by the fact that the weapons seem to lack any sort of desired impact. I mean, this would be all well and good if we were talking about Prince of Persia, but Assassin's Creed is kind of renowned for the stabby stuff. And it's not so much if it's more of a peaceful Assassin's Creed. It's perhaps a bit lighter in tone. The game is set in 1841 and follows Arbaaz, a young man in the middle of a war between the Sikh Empire and the East India Company. Arbaaz is trying to find a famous diamond, which also happens to be a piece of Eden, that belonged to an assassin brotherhood. And your aim is to protect the ones you love and care for from the dangers that are tied to this ancient artifact, while also bringing it back to your mentor. Arbaaz treats his missions with a modicum of respect, but also looks down his nose at his enemies, often disregarding their abilities. You see his playful nature come into effect when he meets his beau, Pyara Kao, as the two exchange some playful banter which soon turns into a frivolous foreplay. Arbaaz has little regard for authority and enjoys a rebellious streak, which makes him perhaps a bit more cheeky chappy than perhaps previous assassins who we've either been known to be quite straight-laced or a little bit of a romanticist. Of course, he still has all the familiar traits. Arbaaz can dive into bushes to avoid being seen, climb trees and jump between them. He uses a grappling hook to scale the ceilings and even crouches behind cover. It's vintage stuff in the Creed games, but all done against a 2.5D setting, and it actually works quite wonderfully. The addition of side missions in the game is also a nice way to keep players coming back to try and improve their score when they get a little fatigued with the general objectives that are set out for them. So what about any future expansion and development? Well, I find it incredibly odd that this was billed as a trilogy from the beginning, yet nothing has really been done to try and link the games in terms of giving players additional rewards for playing one or the other. It would have been nice to have seen some extra weapons or power-ups if you have an existing save game in your system, or some other way to link them together. Also, Russia, the concluding part of this trilogy, has only just launched as well. When you consider that India only just launched a few weeks before, this feels like a very rushed affair, as India's barely had time to find its feet on the marketplace. Ubisoft really should have tried to pace the releases out a bit better. What we do know is that the trilogy will be coming to PlayStation Vita in April, which is arguably the best thing for the series. These definitely feel like they benefit on handhelds more than on home platforms. We also know that there won't be a main Assassin's Creed release this year, with the follow-up to Syndicate coming in 2017. So, aside from this and the mobile release of Identity later this month, we know the Assassin's Creed series isn't going anywhere and is still going to enjoy a healthy release schedule. That said, it is being a tad more reserved than is standard practice for Ubisoft. So, the good stuff, it obviously looks beautiful as you can see here. The Creed mechanics work surprisingly well in 2.5D format, as we already established from China, and there's some nice variety with the side missions, which is quite new for India. The bad stuff, unfortunately, is that the combat just feels off and out of time. The difficulty spike is a little too harsh in the early going, and it feels a tad rushed towards the end, because it feels like they've just tried to rush out India and then they followed it straight away with Russia. It feels like the development cycle with these two games was very closely linked, whereas China had a bit more time to breathe. But in the final analysis, Assassin's Creed Chronicles India is a neat idea, and it did actually work really well with China, but unfortunately India is just a bit of a step backwards, and while it introduces some neat ideas to add longevity, it's not a game you'll feel encouraged to play for a lengthy period of time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.